Cyberpunk 2077, at one point before its release, was believed to be the game that was going to revolutionize video games. Hell, if you don't believe me, just go look at the comment sections under the trailers for Cyberpunk, and you'll see a bunch of people talking about how hyped they are for the game, how awesome it's going to be. Which in retrospect feels like remembering how at first I thought COVID-19 wasn't going to be a big deal. Or just COVID, I guess. But after Cyberpunk's infamous release, it was considered an incredible disappointment, and so broken that PlayStation pulled Cyberpunk from the store and offered refunds. Something that almost never happens. Now, 6 years later, it has a very positive review score on Steam and is viewed in a much more charitable light. So, is and was Cyberpunk any good? To answer that question, I'm going to look at both the good and the bad of Cyberpunk. And boy, do I have a lot to talk about. If you doubt my qualifications on this topic, know that I have been playing this game on and off since its initial 2020 release. I played it on the PS4, then the PS5, and now finally as a part of the glorious PC Master Race. So strap in, Choom, and prepare yourself for a Cyber Psycho's ramblings. Okay, I'm going to start off with the good of Cyberpunk for two reasons. Firstly, to give you an idea where I'm coming from when I say this game is good and why it's one of my favorite games. Secondly, that means I get to talk about the flaws of Cyberpunk, apart from the bugs, at the end, which is more interesting. I think one of the positive things that I can say confidently about Cyberpunk is that no other game has been able to immerse me in its world like Cyberpunk has been able to, and my god, it's no wonder why. Just a short walk down any street in Night City is enough to show the amount of effort the developers put into Cyberpunk's environmental design. From trashy building-sized ads to the vendors you buy your guns from, almost everything in Night City feels handcrafted, which is a dumb thing to say because every game world is handcrafted. But I suppose that some games feel less handcrafted than others. All games are equal, but some games are more equal than others. Back to my point. Apart from the small details in the environmental design, a big reason for the immersion in Cyberpunk is the first-person view. Now hear me out, I know a lot of people were disappointed when it was announced that Cyberpunk was going to be fully first-person view and that players would not even have the option to go third-person view. But I honestly believe that the developers were really clever when they made that decision. By fully committing to the first-person view, developers were able to make the transition from usual gameplay to scripted events feel seamless. For example, when the game wants you to talk to a specific, usually important NPC, it will give you a prompt like stand by window, or sit, or even the odd incapacitate agent, along with the dialogue choices. This is quite clever as it essentially fixes your point of view into a certain position. This means that the developers can create a more tailored experience during dialogue without having to resort to flashing us a black screen and having a cutscene take place, or magically putting us in the standard dialogue position, which in turn allows the developers to make scenes feel more natural and impactful without taking away too much control from the player. If you think I'm exaggerating how clever this is, compare this to some other video games where you have a really important and the moment completely falls flat because both the POV character point of view and NPC are just sort of standing there. When you combine this technique with the incredible face capture that Cyberpunk has, it makes the characters feel and look so alive. If you don't believe me, just look at this one example from the prologue of the game.
Take it you were the one to call?
Got an offer for...
Thought you could blackmail me, fucker? Set conditions? Got any more for me?
Calm the fuck down, I just want to talk!
Christ, Meredith!
Shut your trap! That fucking thing ready?
All set.
Now answer my questions. Honestly, forthrightly. Are you here alone?
But it isn't just the facial animations that make the characters feel this realistic. You can tell a lot of effort went into the body language of the characters. For example, look at Jackie during this scene. You can tell he's trying to look cool and confident, but he's obviously nervous because he keeps moving his leg, which makes sense because he is a low-level merc on his way to robbing one of the most powerful and influential people in the world. Another example of how well Cyberpunk uses body language for their characters is when Hanako uses a proxy.
Ugh. That on the wall, is that blood?
Yeah. Knocked the last star off this dump. So, you were saying, got a message?
Sitting right here. It'll start soon.
What'll start?
It's a doll.
Or a proxy?
I must make one thing clear. I still think you are mad, but
Hanako. That you?
For those who don't know, a proxy is a messenger that rich people use to avoid appearing in person. It works like this. The rich person, or influential I guess, sends the proxy to a place where they need a representative. And when they need to communicate, the rich person essentially takes over the body of the proxy. Simply by how the proxy straightens herself and pushes away the ashtray, you can tell that Hanako was taking over before she even said anything. This attention to detail is also there for the writing of the characters. Hell, the YouTuber Shaped by Stories has almost like 50 videos that are just character analysis videos of the characters in Cyberpunk, and most of them are longer than 20 minutes, even for characters that have as much relevance to the plot as customer happiness has relevance to Bethesda. Please check her videos out. One of my favorites is her Solomon Reed video. It's really worth a watch. This great character writing makes it so that a lot of NPCs feel like they could be the main character of their own stories, and that V is just some guy or gal standing in their way. A lot of these characters I wish we could see more of. To highlight how well Cyberpunk's characters are, I'm going to analyze one scene from the game. But first, a bit of background on the character taking center stage. Evelyn Parker. Evelyn is and was a working girl, you know, the euphemism. However, at one point she received a simple job, to make a recording of a rich man's hotel room. A room at a hotel called Konpeki Plaza. The job was simple. Use her braindance recorder and implant that is not visible to make a recording of Yorinobu's room layout, and afterwards bring that recording back to her employer. However, this is where Evelyn deviates from her employer's plan and keeps the recording for herself. She figured out what her employer wanted and brought the recording to someone else. What her employer really wanted was a very expensive piece of tech, and they needed the recording in order to steal it. But instead of taking it back to them, Evelyn took the recording and hatched a plan to steal it for herself, and to make a small fortune in the process. Now, considering what you've heard, you might think that Evelyn is out of her depth, and that she has taken an extremely big risk doing all this. Well, congratulations, you are absolutely right. Things don't go well for Evelyn. That's actually an understatement. But anyway, back to the reason I gave you that little glimpse into Evelyn's background. Evelyn is essentially faking it till she makes it, which is relevant to the scene I want to show you. This scene is where Evelyn meets V for the first time, and she essentially tells V what his, or her, job is going to be. And at one point, the topic of Konpeki Plaza comes up. Now, if you chose the corpo background for V, a background that means V worked for one of the most powerful corporations in the world and grew up well off, rich, the conversation can go something like this.
Arasaka's poured billions into personality transfer technology. But me, I just want the data on this one. The chip is tucked away inside Konpeki Plaza, the hotel. You ever been?
Arasaka seems to have quite the touch with that hotel chain. But I gotta say, Konpeki in Tokyo still leagues above the rest.
The two are identical to each other.
Japan's staff, huh? The service can't be beat. Singapore, Paris, Washington. All the rest act like charity case cousins by comparison.
Well, it's hard to argue with that. True.
Remember what I told you before about Evelyn, that she is faking it till she makes it.
Konpeki in Tokyo still leagues above the rest.
The two are identical to each other.
Japan's staff, huh? The service can't be beat. Singapore, Paris, Washington. All the rest act like charity case cousins by comparison.
Well, it's hard to argue with that. True.
Well, you just saw that firsthand. I'm not sure if you caught it while watching the clip, but the way Evelyn reacts in combination with her facial animations show that she is only pretending to be someone who knows a lot about Konpeki Plaza and the lifestyle of people who frequent that hotel. Namely, the affluent lifestyle. She is pretending to know a hell of a lot more than she actually does.
He's fallen for the biggest lie this town puts forward. That he can gain and retain control of anything.
But when she comes into contact with someone who's actually lived that lifestyle, it's obvious how out of her depth she actually is. Which is a perfect analogy for her character. To be fair, everyone who is taking this job is completely out of their depth.
Know what I see looking at you? Walking, talking corpses.
But my point is that almost every interaction with the characters in this game feels handcrafted and extremely immersive. No other game I've played gets to the same level in this regard. And that includes Baldur's Gate 3, a game that I believe is objectively better than Cyberpunk. Okay, on to my next and final point on why I think Cyberpunk is so good. It's kind of hard to describe, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I believe there are two types of good games, objectively good and subjectively good. Like I said, Baldur's Gate 3 is to me an objectively better game than Cyberpunk. Baldur's Gate 3 has more content, much more freedom of choice, is an actual RPG, and gives the players a lot more interaction with the characters, and most importantly, was functional on release. CD Projekt Red, if that is your real name. Despite this, to me Cyberpunk is subjectively a better game. This part on why Cyberpunk is so good is going to be a bit strange. That is because this part is going to be, as stated before, completely subjective. And the reason why it is subjective is because it's going to talk about the emotional impact that Cyberpunk had on me. Of all the games that I've played, very few of them have stuck with me like Cyberpunk has, and truth be told, I'm not even sure how to put it into words, but I'll try anyway. But before I start, if anything I've said to you before this point has you wanting to play Cyberpunk for any reason, please skip this part, because I do not want to spoil the experience of playing it yourself. The rest of the video is going to be talking more about the mechanical parts of Cyberpunk, so it won't really spoil anything. If you want to skip this part, go to the timestamp on screen right now. I will give you a second. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Cyberpunk at its core is a game about dying. For those of you who have played the game, you know how it ends. No matter which ending you get, it's impossible to call any of them a completely happy ending. Even the happiest and most optimistic ending, the star ending in my opinion, is bittersweet at best. No matter what you do in the game and which ending you get, all it feels like you have done is manage to extend your life a bit more, or V's life. And the one ending where you actually manage to save your own life results in you losing everything you gained during the duration of the game. Your new abilities, your new strength, and most importantly, the relationships you formed. The different endings ask the question, is survival worth sacrificing everything for? Do you want a quiet life that ends quietly, even if it's an empty life? Would you sell your soul to the devil for a chance at survival? Or would you rather choose to live out what little time you have left with the ones you love? Or simply shoot for the stars or die trying? These endings do in a way let you choose what your V values the most, and if you build your V in a way that reflects yourself, the ending reflects what you value the most. Cyberpunk 2077 manages to capture what makes its namesake such an impactful genre. We know there are no happy endings in Night City, but we can't help but watch it play out, because as corny as it sounds, it's not the start or the ending that matters, it's everything that happened in between. Okay, I'm sorry if that was too sappy for the middle of the video, but I promise the more light-hearted part of the video is next. Before that though, please tell me which of the endings were your favorites if you played the game. My favorite ending was the star ending, but the sun ending is a real close second. But for now, it's time for The first thing I want to talk about is the characters. I know, that seems hypocritical after talking about how great the characters are a few minutes ago, but that's my point. The flaw with Cyberpunk's characters is that there isn't more of them, or more specifically, we don't get to spend enough time with them. What I mean is that although I do really like the characters in Cyberpunk, it really feels to me, at least, that for some of them, their character development and dedicated storylines were a bit rushed, and that some of the characters that feel like they should be romanceable and have their own dedicated storyline told through side quests just don't. For those who don't know, Cyberpunk has 4 romanceable characters in the game, namely Panam Palmer, Judy Alvarez, Kerry Eurodyne, and last and somewhat least River Ward. A big problem is that half of these romance options, namely Kerry and River, are really easy to miss, as the quests where you meet them are side quests and come in pretty late in the game as opposed to the other 2, Panam and Judy, who are linked to the main quest line and who you meet early into the game. Now, I'm no expert story writer or average story writer, but I do believe if half your romanceable characters appear this late in the story, I think you messed up. For reference, for those of you who have played Baldur's Gate 3, imagine if Gale, Astarion, and Will only appeared in late Act 2 and didn't have their own parasites to link them to the main quest line. I know it's weird to bring up Baldur's Gate 3 out of nowhere, but it's the easiest comparison that I can think of to make my point. I'm actually going to do this again later. I should really have called the bad section the Baldur's Gate 3 spoiled me section. Continuing my point, or even worse, it feels like River Ward's questline is missing, well, a lot of quests. River is an honest cop working for one of the most, if not the most corrupt police force in the world. And when he finds out that his partner is equally corrupt and helped cover up the death of the mayor, he tries to report him to Internal Affairs. Long story short, he ends up leaving the NCPD, the Night City Police Department. Problem is, we literally just learned this part developed through a few lines of dialogue, and I'm not kidding, a text message. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but I believe that a bunch of the quests were removed for where we help River figure out who was responsible for the death of Lucius Rhine, the previous mayor of Night City. Oh, and by the way, it was Arasaka. It was absolutely Arasaka. But anyway, these quests being removed makes River's character feel half-baked. I know there are people that disagree with me, but that's just what it feels like to me, which is a shame because if River was fleshed out a bit more, he could have been a really interesting character, but unfortunately he ends up being just a basic good cop in a bad city archetype we've seen a lot of times before, which isn't inherently bad. I mean, come on, a good person trying to fight a corrupt system is intriguing, but maybe a losing battle in Cyberpunk or Night City. Another character that I'm absolutely convinced had their content cut due to time and resource constraints during development is Meredith Stout. I'm pretty sure she was going to be a full-fledged romance option at one point, but was cut during development. My evidence for this is only her intense yoga class. The fact that the scene exists for such a small and mostly irrelevant character makes me think she was meant to have a bigger role at one point. But these examples lead me to one of the most conflicting parts of Cyberpunk. On the one hand, I really like all the small details put into the creation of Night City and Cyberpunk 2077 in general. It truly breathes life into the world and makes it extremely immersive. But I wish that developers spent more time on finishing and fleshing out the side characters rather than adding so much detail. So basically, I want to know how many fully detailed cars do I have to sacrifice to the corporate guards to let Meredith have her own side quests. And I'm going to linger on this point because it's the second big issue I have with Cyberpunk and CD Projekt Red in general. I think CD Projekt Red spends too much time trying to make their newer games look photorealistic, and in the end, their games suffer because of it. They spend so much time trying to make their games photorealistic that they don't have enough time for doing more important things like finishing character quest lines, giving more role-playing choices, or fixing their bugs. And I am genuinely concerned about The Witcher 4. I mean, look at this! Look at this! Why don't you just come into my house and set my PC on fire? It would cost you less money. Please, CD Projekt Red, don't make your games that only people with a RTX 4090 and 64GB of RAM can run your game above 20 frames per second. Please, step away from the ledge. Choose style over realism, or at least just make it look like The Witcher 3. It doesn't need to look any better than this. But enough on that point. I want to move on to a different problem I have with Cyberpunk. I have heard Cyberpunk be described as a playable movie. This is both a backhanded compliment and a generous insult. When people describe Cyberpunk in this way, I kinda have to agree with them. You see this? That stands for role in the word role-playing game. Despite calling itself an RPG, it does not offer you that many role-playing options. That's why the term playable movie is a backhanded compliment. It's one way of saying that Cyberpunk is nice to look at and can be very immersive, but it doesn't give the player as much agency as it should. At least not enough to justify the RPG label it has on it. Thus, the movie comparison. Overall, Cyberpunk, apart from the different endings, doesn't give you that much choices of what type of character you want to play. For example, you can't really play an evil character if you want to. I mean, you can be an absolute dickhead, and if you want to, you can choose the I'm a dickhead dialogue option, but otherwise, it won't really have that many consequences. You essentially have two choices: complete the quest or fail the quest. The way you complete the quest is up to you, but you can't choose to be as evil as possible. To show how starved and decrepit the RPG mechanics are in Cyberpunk, let's look at the life path options. During character creation, you are given the choice to choose between 3 life paths: Street Kid, Nomad, or my personal favorite, Corpo. So, if you haven't played the game, you're probably wondering how the life paths affect the game and the story. The answer: each life path has about as much impact on the story as a college graduate's first job has on their student debt. Negligible at best. Each life path has its own special epilogue mission, which is nice, but that is as good as it gets. You do also get one smaller mission later into the game as well, but apart from that, you only get dialogue options. These dialogue options are useful, sometimes, but much like the USA's Department of Justice, it's mostly decorative. This really sucks because I feel like the developers could have made one of the life paths the default and not a choice, and nobody would have noticed the difference, unfortunately. I believe at one point there were plans by the developers to give the game more robust role-playing options, but was later cut. How do I know this? Well, it's elementary, my dear Watson. If we look at the 48-minute long Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay reveal that came out in 2018, we can see a dedicated background check tab in the character creation for V. This tab has its own backstory section which lets you create a way more complex V than what we got. You are told to choose between 3 childhood heroes that your V could have: Johnny Silverhand, Morgan Blackhand, and Saburo Arasaka. You also choose a key life event: death of a sibling, ran away from home, or your big first kill. Lastly, you get to choose why your V is in Night City. Do they have unfinished business? Do they have an ex-lover in town? Or do they have something to prove? It's so weird watching this gameplay reveal today. I just get a massive wave of nostalgia. I remember downloading the YouTube video and watching it over and over again, and how I got so hyped that I bought Cyberpunk day one. It's the first and last time I ever pre-ordered a full game. But back on topic, these 3 choices are really interesting, and I'm just imagining how they could have impacted the gameplay. For example, your relationship with Johnny in the game could have completely changed depending on whether you chose him as your childhood hero. V could have gone from fully fanboying or fangirling over him to being disappointed with who he really is, and then accepting him for being a flawed human being that he really is. Or V and Johnny could start the game loathing one another if V had Saburo Arasaka as their childhood hero. V could have had the equivalent of an Arasaka Tesla at the start of the game and refused to get rid of it until they went through some much needed character growth. Or they could have kept it until the end. Truly the worst possible ending. Unfortunately, this lack of role-playing choices also affects the gameplay. Often what you can actually do in missions is pretty limited, especially in missions within the main questline. Remember when I said Baldur's Gate 3 spoiled me? Well, here's another example of that. To illustrate my point, I'm going to compare a quest from Baldur's Gate 3 to a quest from Cyberpunk 2077. The quest that I chose from BG3 is just named Find the Missing Shipment. This mission can be found in a few different ways and completed in a few different ways as well. Either you can find an organization of mercenaries that the missing shipment belongs to and they give you the job of finding it, or you find a cart wreckage that eventually leads you to the shipment. But standing between you and the shipment is two groups. Firstly, there are the people that work for the organization that hired you to find the shipment, and secondly, a pack of gnolls, a type of monster that resembles a hyena standing on its back legs and has the manners of one as well, meaning that they have as much regard for your life and well-being as a coyote has for a missing infant. In this situation, you can either choose to side with the people or the gnolls. If you sided with the mercenaries and managed to keep them alive, good job by the way, then you can return to the people that gave you the job and receive your payment for a job well done. Or you can decide to cut a deal with one of the surviving mercenaries, have them tell their superiors that the shipment was lost and you sell it instead, splitting the profit with the mercenary you made the deal with. This unfortunately doesn't go as planned. If you try to sell the shipment behind your employer's back, you get caught red-handed, with the guy you cut a deal with ending up tied to a chair and beaten within an inch of his life. Apparently, he isn't a very good liar. Of course, your employer isn't exactly happy with you and has a place 6 feet down where she wants to put you. But you can gaslight your way out of this. By being really charming, you can convince her to spare you. She agrees, but only if you kill the guy you made a deal with and give her the shipment. That way, you can put this whole thing behind you and still receive a payment like a good boy. Or you can tell her to go where the sun doesn't shine.
And they took exception to that.
Obviously, after that, they try to kill you. But good news, if you emerge victorious, you can free the man you made a deal with and just take your payment from your previously alive employer's corpse. And afterwards, you can, like me, rob your old employer's hideout for everything it has. Just this one side quest within BG3 has so many different diverging paths and gives the player so many choices of how they choose to complete the quest, or even if they want to complete the quest at all. What makes this even more impressive is that this quest isn't even linked to the main storyline, which means there's a possibility that the player doesn't even interact with this quest or even knows that it exists. The fact that so much effort and thought went into something that the player might completely miss is one of the many reasons Baldur's Gate 3 is universally loved by the gaming community, or mostly loved by the community.
And the game of the year is
Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Now it's time for the painful part, to compare it to a quest in Cyberpunk 2077. The quest I'm choosing to compare to BG3 is the mission Shrine Defiled. The concept of the quest is rather simple. Your employer, Wakako, wants you to plant a listening device within a traditional Japanese temple. She wants this because the various heads of a gang called the Tiger Claws are meeting at a shrine, and naturally, she wants you to listen in on them. So, what are your options as a player in this mission? Well, the mission has one small caveat. You are not allowed to be detected by any of the enemies, because, ideally, Wakako wants no one to know that you have planted the listening device in the first place. But in reality, it doesn't matter if you are detected or not. You can go in guns blazing and blast every Tiger Claw you can see all the way back to Japan, and not much will change. As long as you still plant the listening device, the mission will be considered complete. The only thing you lose is the special reward you get for doing everything silently, and it's probably a weapon that you already have a much better version of. To be fair, if you just start killing civilians within the temple, you will just fail the mission outright and receive nothing, except for Wakako's Asian mom scorn.
You were to do this quietly. It was anything but.
So, let's summarize. There are 3 possible outcomes for this mission. Plant the listening device and do so quietly, receiving the mission reward and a bonus. Plant the listening device but alert the Tiger Claw guards to your presence. You only receive the mission reward with no bonus. And lastly, you can fail the mission in its entirety and receive no reward or bonus. See, there's basically only 2 outcomes when it comes to this mission. Either you fail or you succeed, which doesn't really sound like a problem, but remember, this is supposed to be an RPG, a role-playing game. The game should be allowing you to play a particular role. The only role-playing choice I am given in this mission is whether I want to be a successful mercenary or a failure of a mercenary or only somewhat of a failure. If you compare that cut to the BG3 mission, you can see why it feels... well, it kind of feels pathetic in comparison. Some of you that have played Cyberpunk might be thinking right now that I'm nitpicking a bad example and that there are missions in Cyberpunk that give you the opportunity to roleplay. And you're not completely wrong, there are missions like that, especially in the Phantom Liberty expansion, but in the base game, most of the fixer missions can be summarized as go there and fetch that, go there and kill them, go there and do that without being seen. These fixer missions are just glorified ways of getting cash, experience and street cred. At times, it does just feel like busy work. Hell, it could be argued that fixer missions aren't even the best way to get cash, XP and street cred. You could also just do the NCPD missions. For clarity, NCPD stands for Night City Police Department. These NCPD missions fall into 3 categories: assault in progress, reported crime and suspected organized crime activity. Don't worry if they sound complicated, they aren't. 2 out of the 3 just amount to kill people in this area, and the other one is read these data shards and figure out what to do from there. These have a benefit over fixer missions though, and that is that they are much quicker to finish, and sometimes these jobs even give you more cash than the fixers will. Serve and protect indeed. I swear half of the NCPD's budget goes directly to you, the player. All of this is just to make the point that most of Cyberpunk's side missions are mostly pointless. To be fair, I feel like the developers realized this later on. I say this because in Phantom Liberty, the expansion for Cyberpunk that came out 3 years after the initial release fixed this problem. The main fixer in Phantom Liberty, Mr. Hands, only has 10 missions dedicated to him, but each mission has a lot of depth to it and are very interesting morally. So hopefully the writers or developers, I'm not sure which one, will do the same in the eventual sequel, Cyberpunk 2 Electric Boogaloo. Cyberpunk is a very mixed bag of a game. In the end, what saved it was the writing and the characters. I say that it was saved because despite the circumstances of its initial release, the reviews for this game on Steam is summarized as very positive, and that's pretty much my opinion on Cyberpunk as well. Something that I need to remind you of in case the last few pages convinced you otherwise. So, as a game, you could say that it aged very well. This is due to no small part thanks to the developers who, long after its initial disastrous release, kept working hard in order to improve it. I mean, come on, how many games can you say had their entire skill system changed by the developers in order to make it more fun after release? However, like I said in the intro, despite the fact that the game is in a very good state at the moment, I don't want other developers to look at Cyberpunk and take away the lesson, it's alright if we release the game in a bad state, as long as we fix it later. But despite that, I think the reason why I stuck with Cyberpunk all these years later, and the reason that it has a review rating of very positive on Steam, is the same. It's the writing. Despite the bugs and other technical issues that Cyberpunk had, its writing managed to save it. Because in the end, the writing of a game, meaning its story and its characters, etc., is what largely determines how beloved it becomes by the gaming community in general. It doesn't matter how good a game's gameplay is, bad writing will scare off a lot of possible fans, and vice versa. If a game's writing is good enough, people are willing to overlook a lot of jank and other bullshit. And that is why Cyberpunk has aged so well in comparison to a game like Starfield. Game patches can fix things like bugs and even mechanical issues, but no amount of patches can really fix bad or boring writing and boring characters like in Starfield. People will wholeheartedly recommend games even if the graphics and gameplay aren't that great, if the writing is good enough. That is essentially what this video is. A strong recommendation that you play this game if you haven't already. Like I said already, it is my favorite game, with a bold asterisk next to favorite. And Cyberpunk is a really good first foray into the first-person shooter genre for CD Projekt Red. And if they can build upon their mistakes, they will be able to make a spectacular sequel, improving on the things that I mentioned above, which isn't out of the question. Phantom Liberty, the only expansion for Cyberpunk, already improved on a lot of the complaints that I made in the video, while also adding more of the things that made the base game good. But one thing that I want to ask CD Projekt Red, on a very slight chance that they might be listening, please, please, please make the next game require less high-grade hardware. Unfortunately, due to AI data centers, hardware components for gaming is getting more and more expensive, and even for Cyberpunk 2077, you require high-spec hardware in order for the game to look and run well. I know I have no idea how game development works, but at this point, making your game require high-grade equipment is shooting yourself in the foot, and then charging your customer for it. So, if you made it to this part of the video, thank you for watching, I really appreciate it. And if you can play Cyberpunk in terms of gaming, I would consider it a once-in-a-generation experience and sticks with you long after you finished it. You can also often get it on sales if you are patient enough to wait, and I also wholeheartedly recommend. It's a really fun and well-written spy action thriller with really interesting and complex characters and could be a whole game within itself. And while I'm recommending things, please check out my other videos on the channel. They're pretty good if I do say so myself. And please like and subscribe to see more content like this. And to please our corporate gods. Hell, even leave a comment if you want to call me a doo-doo head for calling this game my favorite. And thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it and I hope to see you again.